our man JT Sounds, who also always loves to dive into the recruiting, and he's asking Cam about Brian Balom, who's the 70th rated safety in America, according to a 247 Sports composite out of Hollywood's Miramar High School.
Out of Miramar's Miramar High School, by the way, in the city of Miramar, the flagship school in the city of Miramar. My former employer, by the way, and my former student. 2 years ago, when my last year at Miramar, Brian was in my study hall class. He's an IB student. I actually taught him. I didn't teach him; it was study hall, but we did, collaborate on a couple of different things. And I had previously taught his brother years before him, so I know Brian personally. I know his family, great family, good people, and he's a good kid. Like I said, and I know him personally, and this is my unbiased opinion. Well, no, the personal stuff, that's my biased opinion. I think that he's a good kid from a good family, all that kind of stuff. Athletically, the unbiased opinion is he can play. And he's maybe a little bit of a late bloomer, but if you look at the history of Miramar High School and the coaching staff that is and has been there, and the players on defense, especially in the secondary, who they have developed, that is, there is quality over the course of time. So, if you're looking at guys like a Morrell Jackson at safety who went to Hawaii, if you look at Tracy Howard, Josemar Diaz, he was an All-American at Valparaiso. I know it's not Division I, but another good quality football player. He was just maybe a little bit small. Henry Gray, who's, everybody's All-American, he was at Miramar for almost 2 years, and he played, a football season there, had a fall camp, had a spring camp before he left out. He's another kid who's going to be a high-level recruit. Chandler Jones, who previously went to Miami Central. Before he went there, he was at Miramar for 3 years. There's a history, especially in the secondary, of Miramar developing quality players with, good size, great technique, and the ability to play. I think that Brian Balom is one of those guys. Is he the number one guy that you would want necessarily? Probably not. As a number 70th ranked overall safety in the country, I think that Miami should be shooting higher than that at the top of the position. And I think that they've done that. But I think that he could be a great program guy. He could be a great special teams guy. And maybe, as a, third or fourth year guy down the line, he could be in line for some rotation snaps on defense, and he could adjudicate himself very well on the field. So, there are other teams who are pursuing Brian Balom. Obviously, West Virginia with Miramar's history to that school. The former coach, Damon Cogdell, went to West Virginia. So did Geno Smith. So did Stedman Bailey. So did Ivan McCartney. So did a couple other guys. Josh Taylor, who's now the coach at Carroll City. He went up there. Devontis Arnold, who was a preferred walk-on up there. I'm even forgetting some guys, but suffice it to say that plenty of guys from Miramar have gone to Morgantown. That was actually my very first piece as a blogger, was talking about the Miramar-Morgantown connection years ago. Anyways, so they're in on Brian Balom. Louisville is in on Brian Balom because he's that kind of fringe, first tier, second tier kind of South Florida kid that they look at, kind of like a Tutu Atwell, who if Tutu Atwell was 6'1", he'd have been everybody's All-American. He'd still be playing quarterback, but he's 5'7". But he's fast. So then you put him in, as a slot receiver and things like that. You let him make plays. So there are other teams in on Brian Balom as well. And I think that it's going to go for a while. I know for a fact, personally, that Brian is a very methodical, cerebral person. So I think that he will not be swayed by the lights of recruiting. I don't think that he's going to just kind of make a knee-jerk reaction commitment. Knowing him, and having worked with him very closely, I was his mentor for his sophomore IB project. So we did work very closely on some things. He is a methodical person. He's going to go through his steps. He's going to go through his pros and cons, and obviously, pray about it, consult his family about it, and go where he really feels, a good fit. So I think the Miami is in a good place for him. I think that if Miami pushes strongly, that they could end up with him. But I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, just because of the nature of him making this process.
There was a comment made by Anthony Manzano, and if I can find it, I'll put it back on the screen. But it was asking you to contrast and compare the style and level of high school football played in South Florida versus what's played on the West Coast.
It's just more fierce down here in South Florida. It's faster. You just have better athletes everywhere. On the West Coast of Florida, there's still athletes in the West Coast, in California, there's athletes, but I mean, man, you just look at every position in South Florida, and these guys are just, I mean, man, there's just athletes everywhere. You look at a Central Northwestern game, you look at a Miramar St. Thomas game, you look at Southridge, South Dade, you look at any of these guys or any of these teams, these games that'll happen on a weekly basis, and there is just so much talent. And I got indoctrinated into that when I came down to UM in 2000, and I was talking about the high school football that I knew coming from Michigan. And the pinnacle of Michigan high school football is Birmingham Brother Rice and Detroit Catholic Central. Brother Rice was 3 miles down the street from Cranbrook, where I went to school, and then both of my uncles went to Catholic Central. So of course they were talking about, oh, CC this, CC that, and they would play annually in they had a league game, and they would usually meet in the state quarterfinals or semifinals, and one of them would always win states. And I'm like, oh yeah, Brother Rice Catholic Central, like it can't get better than that. And one of my next door neighbors in college had gone to Miami Central, and he was like, nah, bro. And I'm like, no, like it's not better than that. And I said, okay. And he said, we'll go to Traz one Friday night. I don't matter who's playing. It could be my school, it could be Central, it could be whoever. We'll go out one Friday night. I saw Jackson Norland, I want to say, at a time when Jackson and Norland was like a regular ass average game. And I thought that they were on crack. They were moving so fast. I had never seen anything like that. The hits, like everything. It was another level. And that was just some regular teams. That wasn't even superstar teams with superstar players. So I say all that to say the floor of South Florida high school football, I mean, there are some really, really bad teams. Yes, because you're going to kind of have the good talent come together and want to play together, just like at the college level, excuse me. But for the mid-tier and upper teams, they're so good. They would destroy the best teams from your area, your state, your whatever. With, I mean, some exceptions. That St. Francis team from Maryland that's basically IMG up in the DMV area, you're not going to beat them as an average team. The, Mater Dei, the Centennial, the Pinnacle in Arizona, like there are teams, there's some teams in Texas that are really, really, really good. So I'm not going to say the cream of the crop, but the average South Florida team, even in those conferences, would probably go 7-3. I mean, it is just a different caliber, and especially at these inner city, at these these neighborhood schools, these inner city situations where those kids are trying to get out and not go back, because I can't go back because my brother was a hood boy and he had beef with these other hood boys, so I'm trying to get this scholarship and get the F out of Dodge so that these other hood boys don't come and get me because of what my brother did. It's a different mentality, yo. It is. So if you haven't seen it, I would say anytime that it's on ESPNU or something, watch it. I would say if you have the ability to, if you're coming down for a Miami game, hit me up or hit somebody up, maybe South Florida High School Sports, my boy JT Wilcox. Just tweet anybody and say, yo, or you don't even need to know. If you're in town for a Miami game, find yourself at Traz Powell Stadium on a Thursday or Friday night. It costs $5 or $7. They got some good concessions where they bring in, the little vendors and everything. So bring another $20. Go do that. Go sit in the stands. Be sure what side you're on. Look and see what the color is, because you don't want to be rooting for the opposite team. I did that one time. I was rooting for Duke Johnson and Norland, but I was sitting on the Northwestern side because my buddy who I went with was a friend of the band director for Miami Northwestern, and I had one of the grandmas from the neighborhood. And so I'm cheering Duke Johnson as he was out the frame. Duke Johnson was an amazing high school player, and he's making all kinds of plays: kick return, pump return, pass, run, everything. I'm like, oh, and everybody's looking at me. So I'm taking my drink. I'm like, oh, this lemonade, good, whatever. And I did that like 3 times. And the third time, this lady, she had to be in her 60s or 70s, grandma age, because it was years ago. So I'm like in my mid-late 20s, and she said, young man, that's gonna be the last time you do that. I said, yes, ma'am. So like you pay attention to your surroundings. But if you come down, just go watch anywhere. If you're way down south, go to Harrisfield. because that's where South Dade plays or Homestead High School plays. There's all kinds of places around. You go to the Mosquito Bowl in North Miami. You can go to Transpal. You can find a school up in Broward. St. Thomas is right over here. Cardinal Gibbons is over here. American Heritage. Hey, I don't work there anymore, so you're not going to hear me on the microphone, but Miramar, they got a good team. They got good games. MacArthur, there's plenty of teams around where you can go and see really good high school football. And even at an average game, the high school football is going to be of a higher caliber with higher caliber athletes than most other places.